At 11:47, the night before my wedding, I opened room 214 at a Hampton Inn outside Dayton and found my fiancé naked in bed with the woman he swore he hadn't spoken to in 3 years. For about 2 seconds, nobody moved. The TV was on low, some late-night sports recap. A lamp glowed beside the bed. Greg's navy suit hung neatly from the closet door, like tomorrow was still supposed to happen. And Vanessa, his ex-wife Vanessa, had one hand wrapped around the hotel sheet against her chest, while staring at me like I was the one interrupting something private. I still remember the smell in that room. Cheap red wine and Greg's cologne. My hand was shaking so hard, the garment bag nearly slipped out of it. Diane Gregg sat up fast enough to knock over a wine glass. "This isn't—" "Oh, don't," I said quietly. Honestly, I don't even remember deciding to speak. The words just came out flat. Empty. I was supposed to marry Greg Whitman at 3 o'clock the next afternoon at Willow Creek Country Club in Vandalia. 140 guests, white roses, string quartet, my cousin Teresa flying in from Phoenix, my church friends baking desserts nobody would touch because there was already a $700 cake. And there I was at nearly midnight, staring at my future husband in a hotel bed with the woman he'd spent 2 years calling ancient history. Vanessa looked uncomfortable for maybe half a second. Then she gave me this tiny little shrug. Not smug, exactly. Worse. Pity. Greg climbed out of bed so fast he nearly tangled himself in the sheets. "Diane, listen to me." I laughed once, short, sharp. Didn't even sound like me. "You brought her here the night before our wedding. It wasn't planned." Vanessa looked away at that. Interesting detail. Greg kept talking, too fast now. "She came by because we needed closure. We were talking, drinking. Things got emotional." "Closure," I repeated. "Please don't do this right now." That sentence hit me harder than the cheating somehow. "Don't do this." Like I was the problem standing there. "I should tell you something important. Greg wasn't some cartoon villain. If he had been leaving, would have been easier. He was charming, funny, the kind of man who remembered birthdays without Facebook reminders. When my father had knee surgery 2 years earlier, Greg drove him to physical therapy twice a week while I worked payroll overtime during tax season. My daughter Lacey used to say, "Mom, he acts like a guy from a truck commercial." And honestly, he did. Reliable, steady, soft-spoken. That's what made standing there feel so unreal. Because your brain does strange things in moments like that, part of mine kept trying to force the picture back into something reasonable. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe this wasn't what it looked like. Maybe 50-year-old women really could still be dumb enough to talk themselves out of obvious betrayal. Then I saw Greg's wedding cufflinks on the nightstand beside Vanessa's purse. And something inside me just dropped. Vanessa finally spoke. "I think maybe you should both talk privately." I turned toward her so slowly she actually flinched. "No," I said. "I think you've both done enough talking." Greg followed me into the hallway barefoot. "Diane, please." The hallway smelled like industrial carpet cleaner and somebody's takeout fries. Ice machine humming down near the elevators. Completely normal night. Meanwhile, my entire life had just cracked open. I made a mistake. "You made a reservation." His face changed then, just for a second. Tiny flicker. Because he realized I understood this wasn't spontaneous. I looked past him into the room. Overnight bags, 2 wine glasses, Vanessa's curling iron plugged into the bathroom outlet. This wasn't closure. This was a plan. "I love you," he said. I actually believed he meant that. That's the sick part. People think betrayal always comes from people who feel nothing. Sometimes it comes from people who feel plenty, just not enough to stop themselves. My chest hurt, physically hurt. I remember gripping the hallway railing because suddenly I thought I might faint. Tomorrow morning, hair appointments started at 8. The florist was already setting up. My sister Janet was probably asleep at the Marriott downtown after spending $1,200 she couldn't afford on this wedding weekend. And all I could think was, I cannot survive being humiliated twice in one lifetime. I'd already gone through one divorce at 36. Back then, people had whispered about me at church for months. Not cruelly exactly. Worse than cruel. Sympathetically. Poor Diane. Poor thing. Now here I was again. Greg reached for my arm. I pulled away immediately. Don't touch me. His eyes filled up then. Real tears. Greg cried easily when emotional. That used to make me trust him more. It didn't mean anything. I stared at him. You risked our entire future for something that meant nothing. He had no answer for that. Vanessa appeared briefly behind him, tying the belt of the hotel robe. She looked annoyed now, more than guilty. Like this had become inconvenient. That made me angrier than anything else. Not enough to scream, though. I wanted to scream, wanted to throw something through the hallway window. Instead, I picked up the garment bag from the floor. You should probably figure out what you're telling people tomorrow, I said. Then I walked away. Greg called after me all the way down the hallway. I never turned around. Outside, the August air felt thick and sticky. I sat in my Honda CR-V for almost 15 minutes without starting it. My phone kept buzzing. Greg calling. Again. 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 I finally threw the phone onto the passenger seat and drove south on I-75, with tears blurring every exit sign between Troy and Dayton. At one point, I missed my turn completely and ended up near Moraine before realizing where I was. By the time I got home, it was almost 2 in the morning. The house was dark, except for the kitchen light over the stove. Lacey walked in wearing old Ohio State sweatpants and one of my hoodies. The second she saw my face, she stopped cold. Mom? I tried to answer normally. Couldn't. She stepped closer slowly. What happened? I sat down at the kitchen table because my knees suddenly didn't feel reliable anymore. Lacey's expression changed. Fear first, then anger. What did he do? For a second, I couldn't say it out loud. Saying things aloud makes them real in a way your brain fights against. Then everything hit me at once. The hotel room. The wine glasses. The bed. The pity on Vanessa's face. I covered my mouth and started crying so hard I could barely breathe. Lacey rushed over immediately, grabbing my shoulders. And through all of it, I finally managed to choke out the truth. He destroyed everything. I didn't sleep at all that night. Not even for 5 minutes. I sat in the kitchen, wearing the same navy dress from the rehearsal dinner, while the digital clock on the microwave crawled from 2:13 to 4:48 to 5:26 in slow, miserable little increments. At some point, I made coffee, burned it because I forgot to put the pot underneath the machine, cleaned it up, made another pot. That one tasted like dirt. Outside, I could hear early traffic starting up on Far Hills Avenue. Garbage truck somewhere down the block. Normal Friday morning sounds. Meanwhile, my wedding day had officially arrived. Lacey stayed up with me for a while before falling asleep on the couch around 4. She'd curled up under an old Bengals blanket from high school, still wearing those gray sweatpants. Every now and then, I'd look over at her and feel this horrible mix of guilt and gratitude. Your children should never have to watch you fall apart at 42 years old. But there she was anyway. I picked up my phone around 6:30 and stared at the lock screen. 23 missed calls from Greg. 9 text messages. The latest one read, "Please answer me. I'm begging you." Another, "I love you. Don't throw us away over one terrible mistake." One terrible mistake. That phrase kept irritating me like a pebble in my shoe. Because cheating wasn't actually the part destroying me anymore. People survive affairs all the time. Ugly truth. No, what kept replaying in my head was the planning. The hotel room. The overnight bags. The way Vanessa had looked comfortable there. That wasn't an accident. That was permission. Lacey woke up around 7:30 and shuffled into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes. For a second, she looked confused seeing me still sitting there. Then she remembered. "Oh," she said softly. She opened the fridge, grabbed orange juice, then leaned against the counter watching me carefully. "You okay?" I laughed quietly. "What do you think?" "Fair question." She nodded once. Then after a minute, "So what are you gonna do?" I didn't answer. Truthfully, I still didn't know. Part of me wanted to call the venue immediately, cancel everything, crawl into bed for 6 months. Another part wanted to drive back to that Hampton Inn and smash Greg's windshield with my tire iron. Instead, I just sat there staring at my cold coffee. Lacey finally said it. "Don't marry him." Simple, direct. 19-year-olds are fearless that way. I looked up at her. "You think it's that easy?" "Yes." "It's not." "Why?" I opened my mouth, closed it again. Because how do you explain this kind of humiliation to someone who hasn't lived long enough to understand pride can become its own prison? Finally, I said quietly, because I can't spend the rest of my life being everybody's cautionary tale. The room went silent after that. Lacey's expression softened immediately. "Oh, Mom. I already did this once," I said. "I already survived one divorce where everybody whispered behind my back at church and brought casseroles like somebody died." "Well, somebody did die," she muttered. I almost smiled despite myself. That was another thing about Lacey. She had her father's dry humor, my first husband's. The decent one. We sat quietly for a while after that. Then memories started surfacing whether I wanted them or not. Little things. Greg standing beside me at Kroger 6 months earlier joking. At our age, romance is basically remembering where we parked. Everybody around us laughed. At the time I laughed too. Now I realized how often Greg made aging sound like surrender. Another memory. The afternoon he convinced me to sell my condo in Kettering and move into his house instead. It just makes more financial sense, Di. At the time that had sounded responsible. Now it sounded convenient. Then another one surfaced. Lacey at dinner last winter quietly asking, "Why does Greg flirt with every waitress over 40? I'd brushed her off immediately. He's just friendly. But sitting there in my kitchen the morning of my wedding, I suddenly understood something awful. Women usually know long before they admit it to themselves. Around 8:15, my phone rang again. "Greg." This time I answered. Silence for half a second. Then immediate relief in his voice. "Oh, thank God." I said nothing. "Diane, please let me explain." "You already explained." No, I panicked. I said the wrong things. What would have been the right thing? Another silence. Finally, "I love you." I closed my eyes. And here's the dangerous part, I still wanted to believe him. That's what nobody tells you about betrayal at this age. Your feelings don't shut off neatly. You can hate somebody and still miss them while they're hurting you. "I need to know if the wedding's happening," he said carefully. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "What do you need?" The wedding. Because guests were arriving. Deposits were paid. The machine was already moving. I stared out the kitchen window at my neighbor watering his lawn. "I haven't decided yet. Please don't humiliate me in front of everybody." That sentence changed something in me. Humiliate him. Interesting concern. Not break my heart, not destroy our future. Humiliate him. I hung up without another word. Lacey had heard enough from across the room. "Oh, he's unbelievable." But she was already reaching for her phone. "What are you doing?" "Calling Tyler." "Who's Tyler?" "The guy I told you about from Sinclair. His uncle manages security systems for the Hampton Inn." I frowned at her. "Lacey." "He checked in early, Mom. I know he did." I stared at her. An hour later, she walked back into the kitchen, holding her phone with a look on her face I'll never forget. Not triumph. Sadness. "Mom," she said quietly, You need to see this. She handed me the phone. Black and white security stills. Time-stamped. Greg entering the hotel lobby with Vanessa at 5:42 p.m. 6 hours before I arrived. In one image, his hand rested casually against her back. Comfortable. Familiar. Not guilty. Not conflicted. Planned. My stomach turned so violently I thought I might actually throw up. Lacey sat beside me carefully. I'm sorry. I kept staring at the images. Then suddenly another thought hit me. I grabbed my laptop from the dining room and opened our shared banking app. Something had been bothering me for weeks. Small withdrawals Greg kept dismissing as business expenses. I started scrolling, then found it. 2 months earlier, $4,800 transferred from our wedding account. Recipient Vanessa Hale. I felt cold all over. Not because of the money. Because suddenly I understood the whole shape of the lie. This hadn't been one reckless night. Greg had been carrying on some version of this relationship the entire time he was planning a future with me. Maybe longer. Lacey watched my face carefully. What? I turned the screen toward her. Her jaw dropped. Oh my God. I leaned back slowly in my chair. And for the first time since opening that hotel room door, the crying stopped. Something steadier replaced it. Not calm exactly. Clarity. Around noon, my sister Janet called, asking if I was headed to hair appointments soon. I heard myself answering normally somehow. Yeah, running a little behind. After we hung up, I went upstairs. My wedding dress hung on the closet door in its plastic garment cover. I stood there staring at it for a long time. Then finally unzipped it. The ivory fabric looked soft in the afternoon light. Hope stitched into satin. I slipped it on slowly, looked at myself in the mirror, and almost didn't recognize the woman staring back. Not because she looked broken. Because she didn't. I touched the edge of the veil carefully and whispered, if he wants a wedding, he'll get one. By 1:30 Sunday afternoon, Willow Creek Country Club looked exactly like the kind of wedding I used to save on Pinterest boards at midnight after my first divorce. White chairs lined up beneath the gazebo overlooking the golf course. Cream-colored roses wrapped around the wooden arch. String quartet warming up near the fountain. Expensive, tasteful, safe. The kind of wedding people describe as elegant, because nobody wants to admit it cost more than their first car. And there I was sitting in the bridal suite upstairs, feeling like I might pass out directly into a tray of mini crab cakes. Mom, breathe. I am breathing. No, you're doing that thing where you breathe like somebody jogging uphill. Lacey stood near the makeup mirror in a sage green bridesmaid dress, holding 2 bottles of water and looking way calmer than I did. I took one from her with shaky hands. My stomach had been twisting nonstop since morning. Not because I doubted what Greg had done. Because I still couldn't fully believe what I was about to do. That's the part people misunderstand about revenge sometimes. They imagine confidence, power, certainty. Real revenge feels more like standing barefoot on railroad tracks, hoping you move before the train reaches you. Hair appointments started at 8 that morning in downtown Dayton. I'd sat in a salon chair for 2 hours, while women curled my hair and chatted about grandchildren and football season, and whether the humidity would ruin the flowers outside. Meanwhile, my entire nervous system felt like exposed wiring. And somehow Greg still hadn't figured it out. Though he came close twice. The first time happened around 11, when he knocked on the bridal suite door unexpectedly. Can I come in? Every muscle in my body locked. Lacey mouthed, oh my God. I opened the door only halfway. Greg stood there already dressed in his tuxedo holding a coffee from Starbucks. For one dangerous second, he looked exactly like the man I thought I was marrying. Warm eyes, nervous smile, tiny crease in his forehead when stressed. I brought you a latte, he said softly. You didn't have to. I wanted to. The smell hit me instantly, vanilla and espresso. My usual order. That nearly broke me. Because cruel people are easier to leave than loving ones who are selfish in exactly the wrong moments. Greg lowered his voice. Thank you for today. I stared at him carefully. For what? For not giving up on us. God help me. There was a moment right then, one awful little moment, where I almost called everything off. Not the wedding. The exposure. I thought, maybe we handle this privately. Maybe people don't need to know. Maybe humiliation helps nobody. Then I remembered Vanessa's hand on the hotel sheet. The texts. The money transfer. The lies layered on top of lies. Greg reached toward my face gently. I know I hurt you. I stepped backward immediately. His expression flickered. Confusion now. Suspicion, maybe. You should go downstairs, I said quietly. People are looking for you. He hesitated another second before nodding. Interesting. I didn't answer. After he left, I shut the door and leaned against it hard enough to rattle the frame. Lacey stared at me. You almost bailed. I rubbed my forehead. I know. You still love him. That one hurt because it was true. Love doesn't vanish on command just because somebody betrays you. Sometimes it lingers around like smoke, long after the fire already destroyed the house. By 2:30, guests had fully arrived. Through the bridal suite window, I could see people crossing the parking lot. Janet waving at relatives, Greg's golfing buddies laughing too loudly, church ladies balancing casserole dishes nobody asked them to bring. Normal wedding chaos. At one point, my cousin Teresa burst into the room, already tipsy from champagne. You nervous? She asked. I almost laughed directly in her face. Instead, I said a little, well, that's healthy. Means you care. If only she knew. A few minutes later came the second moment that nearly destroyed my resolve completely. Greg's mother. Helen Whitman was 73 years old, with silver hair sprayed into place, and watery blue eyes that always made her look emotional, even when she wasn't. She entered the bridal suite, slowly holding my hands immediately. Oh, sweetheart, she whispered. You look beautiful. My throat tightened instantly. Helen had been kind to me from the beginning, truly kind. After my father died the year before, she dropped off homemade soup twice a week without mentioning it to anyone. And now she stood there tearing up over a wedding already dead. I prayed for this, she said quietly. I prayed Greg would finally find somebody good. I thought I might actually collapse. Because innocent people always get caught in the blast radius too. Helen hugged me tightly and whispered, Thank you for loving my son. The guilt hit so hard I nearly told her everything right there. But what would that accomplish? Humiliate an old woman in a bridal suite 30 minutes before ceremony. So instead, I hugged her back and somehow managed, I'm glad you're here. The second she left, I sat down hard in the makeup chair, trying not to cry. Lacey crouched beside me. You don't owe him protection anymore. I know. You don't owe anybody silence. That helped more than she probably realized. At 2:50, the wedding coordinator knocked frantically. Tiny blonde woman named Melissa, who looked one scheduling error away from cardiac arrest. Quick issue, she whispered. The DJ can't open the slideshow file. My stomach dropped straight to the floor. What? He says the formatting changed. For 3 horrifying minutes, I genuinely thought the entire plan had failed. Melissa rushed downstairs while I stood frozen in the bridal suite bathroom, gripping the sink so hard my knuckles hurt. This is insane. What am I doing? I should leave right now. I could still walk out. Drive home. Disappear. Avoid the scene entirely. Honestly, part of me wanted to. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Greg. Almost time. We're gonna be okay. I stared at that message. And suddenly, I wasn't scared anymore. I was angry. Real anger finally arrived clean and sharp. Lacey appeared in the doorway. They fixed it. I exhaled slowly. Outside, the string quartet began playing Canon in D. Showtime. The ceremony started at exactly 3 o'clock. I stood at the back entrance, gripping my bouquet, while guests turned in their seats, smiling. The late afternoon sun hit the golf course just right, everything glowing gold and green. Beautiful enough to hurt. Then the doors opened. The music swelled. And I started walking. Every step felt unreal. My heels clicked against the stone floor, while faces blurred together on both sides. Friends, co-workers, family people who still believed this was a love story. At the altar, Greg looked emotional. Relieved too. Like he thought the storm had passed. I remember thinking, this is the last moment he still believes he's in control. I reached the altar. Greg squeezed my hand gently. Cold fingers, slight tremor. The officiant smiled warmly at the crowd. Dearly beloved. Actually, I interrupted softly. The entire room went still. I turned slowly toward the guests. There's something I think everybody deserves to see before we continue. You could actually hear the silence settle over the room. That's what I remember most. Not gasps, not screaming, not dramatic music like in movies. Just silence. 140 people sitting in white folding chairs, while the projector screen behind the gazebo flickered to life. Greg turned toward me slowly, confused. Diane. I stepped away from him before he could grab my hand. The first image appeared on the screen. Black and white hotel security footage. Timestamp in the corner, 5:42 p.m. Greg entering the Hampton Inn lobby with Vanessa beside him. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. At first, nobody fully understood what they were seeing. Then the next image appeared. Greg touching Vanessa's back near the elevator. Another timestamp. Another angle. The room changed. You could feel it. That subtle movement when people stop watching politely and start paying attention for real. Greg's face lost color immediately. What is this? He whispered. I looked at him evenly. You tell me. Melissa, the wedding coordinator, stood frozen near the sound system, like she regretted every career choice she'd ever made. The next slide appeared. A screenshot of text messages. Vanessa. Tomorrow's the payday, babe. Greg. Just get through one more weekend. Somebody in the audience actually muttered, "Oh, Jesus." Greg lunged toward the DJ table. Turn this off. The DJ looked terrified and pretended not to hear him. Greg spun back toward me. Diane, this is insane. No, I said calmly. The hotel room was insane. The officiant quietly stepped backward out of frame entirely. Smart man. A woman near the front covered her mouth. I recognized her immediately, Greg's coworker Susan from the insurance office. 2 rows behind her, my cousin Teresa whispered, I knew something was off with him. Of course she did. Everybody always knew afterward. Greg lowered his voice harshly. You're humiliating me. There it was again. Not, I'm sorry. Not I hurt you. Humiliating him remained the central tragedy somehow. I felt strangely calm now. Not happy. Definitely not happy. But steady. Like my body had finally decided panic wasn't useful anymore. You humiliated yourself, I said. Then the side doors near the reception hall opened. And Vanessa walked in. That caused actual commotion. People turned fully in their seats now, whispering openly. Vanessa wore dark jeans and a white sleeveless blouse, like she'd come to meet someone for drinks, not attend a destroyed wedding. She stopped cold when she saw the projector screen. Then slowly turned toward Greg. Oh my God, she said. Greg looked horrified. What are you doing here? Vanessa blinked at him. I got a text saying you wanted me here. Interesting thing about liars, the moment their stories collide publicly, panic spreads fast. Greg pointed at me immediately. She set this up. Yeah, Vanessa snapped clearly. She looked furious now, embarrassed too. Good. Not because I wanted another woman destroyed. I didn't. But because I was tired of carrying all the shame alone while the two people who betrayed me hid behind excuses, Greg tried shifting gears fast. "She's lying," he told the crowd. "Vanessa's been obsessed with me for years." Vanessa stared at him like she might actually slap him. Obsessed. Greg realized too late he'd picked the worst possible strategy. Because angry mistresses are dangerous, angry ex-wives are professionals. Vanessa folded her arms tightly. "You slept with me 3 weeks after proposing to her." The crowd made this low collective sound. Not loud, just shocked. Greg looked around desperately now. Vanessa stopped talking. "Oh, now you want me quiet?" She turned toward me briefly, and for the first time all day, she actually looked ashamed. "Diane, I didn't know he was still promising you forever while he was with me." I believed her halfway. Maybe that was generous. Maybe I was tired. Greg stepped closer toward me again, lowering his voice. "Please, let's go somewhere private." "Number." "Please." "You lost private." That landed harder than I expected. A few people actually nodded. Then Vanessa delivered the final blow herself. "You know what he called you?" Greg closed his eyes immediately. Like he already knew. Vanessa looked directly at me. "He said you were the safe choice." That one hurt. Not because I believed it. Because part of me always feared it might be true. Safe. Reliable. Financially stable. Emotionally dependable. A woman, a man settles into instead of falls in love with. For about 3 seconds I honestly thought I might cry in front of everybody. But strangely, I didn't. Because standing there in front of all those people, something finally became clear. Greg didn't just betray me. He underestimated me. The projector screen dimmed behind us. Nobody moved. No quartet music. No clinking glasses. Just late afternoon wind moving through the open sides of the gazebo. Greg tried again. "Diane, I made mistakes." "Mistakes," I said quietly. "You transferred money from our wedding account to her." His eyes widened instantly. That one he hadn't expected me to discover. A ripple moved through the crowd. I saw Janet cover her face completely. Greg stammered now. It wasn't what you think." I almost laughed. The oldest line in human history. I took a slow breath. Then finally addressed everybody instead of just him. "I'm not standing here because he cheated," I said. "People survive cheating. Some marriages even survive affairs." Nobody interrupted. "I'm standing here because this man looked me in the eye for 2 straight years while lying about who he was." Greg looked physically sick now. Good. Not destroyed, not ruined forever. Just exposed. That was enough. I continued carefully because my voice had started shaking. "I sold my condo because we were building a future together. I trusted him with my money, my family, my daughter, and my life." My throat tightened hard on that last word. But trust means something, especially at this age. Several older women in the audience nodded slowly. They understood. More than the younger guests probably did. Because by your 40s and 50s, trust isn't naive anymore. It's earned, carefully. And once broken, it costs more. Greg suddenly dropped to his knees right there at the altar. The room collectively froze. "Please," he whispered, "please don't do this." Honestly, that almost made me pity him. Almost. Then somewhere near the back, Greg's Uncle Marty muttered loudly, "Well, I already ordered the crab cakes." A few stunned laughs escaped before people caught themselves. The tension cracked just enough for everyone to breathe again. Greg looked around wildly like he couldn't understand why nobody was rescuing him. But nobody could. Not anymore. I slipped off my engagement ring slowly. The diamond caught the sunlight for one brief second. Then I took Greg's hand and placed the ring in his palm. His fingers closed around it automatically. "There," I said softly, "that's your closure." And just like that, I walked away from my own wedding. Not triumphant. Not powerful. just exhausted. Behind me, I could hear chaos finally erupting, people whispering, chairs moving, someone crying, Greg calling my name. But I never turned around. By the time I reached the bridal suite upstairs, my legs were shaking so hard I barely made it through the door before collapsing into tears. Real tears this time. Ugly ones. The kind that leave your chest aching afterward. Lacey came in seconds later and wrapped both arms around me while I cried into the expensive white fabric of a dress I would never wear again. And for the first time all day, I stopped trying to hold myself together. About 6 months after the wedding that never happened, I was standing barefoot in my tiny backyard in Yellow Springs, trying to keep tomato plants alive with a garden hose I still hadn't figured out properly. Turns out I'm terrible at gardening. Everything either drowns or dries out under my supervision. But the tomatoes were hanging on somehow. Stubborn little things. Honestly, that felt relatable. The townhouse wasn't much to look at from outside. Brown brick, small porch. Wind chimes left behind by the previous owner that clanked every time Ohio weather changed its mind, which was constantly. But it was quiet. That mattered more than square footage now. No pretending. No tension humming underneath conversations. No checking somebody's face wondering if they were lying to me. Just quiet. I'd moved in 3 months earlier after spending several miserable weeks staying with my sister Janet while untangling finances, canceling contracts, and answering uncomfortable phone calls from relatives pretending they were just checking in. People love disaster as long as it belongs to someone else. Some were genuinely kind. Others wanted details, especially about the wedding. You could always tell which category somebody belonged to by how quickly they asked. So what exactly happened? As if betrayal came with bullet points. Lacey visited almost every Sunday. That afternoon, she walked through the back gate carrying grocery bags and iced coffees from a little cafe downtown. "You killed another basil plant," she announced immediately. "I'm grieving." "You're committing horticultural manslaughter." I laughed for real. First genuine laugh of the day. She set the coffees down on the patio table and looked around the yard. The grass needed trimming. One patio chair had a crack in it. My bird feeder leaned slightly sideways because I installed it wrong. Perfect. Not glamorous, not curated, just mine. Lacey sat down across from me and handed over my coffee. "Oat milk vanilla latte," she said, "because apparently trauma makes you expensive now. 42 years old, and still being bullied by my own child. You raised me." Fair point. We spent most Sundays like that now. Coffee, farmer's market, sometimes baking. Simple things. There's something strange about rebuilding your life in middle age. You don't dream dramatically anymore. You just start appreciating ordinary peace with almost embarrassing intensity. A clean kitchen, a quiet morning, sleeping through the night. Those things become luxury. Not that healing happened neatly. Some nights still caught me off guard. I'd wake up at 3 in the morning, replaying pieces of the wedding in my head, Greg dropping to his knees. The projector light across people's faces. Helen Whitman crying near the reception tables afterward. That part still hurt. Because despite everything, I never wanted to destroy innocent people. I heard later Helen stopped speaking to Greg for nearly 2 months after the wedding. Apparently, she told him, "Your father cheated on me once. I forgave him. But at least he had enough decency not to embarrass everybody." Old women from Ohio can be terrifying when disappointed. As for Greg himself, his life didn't explode dramatically like some movie ending. Honestly, reality's quieter than that. But consequences still arrived. A few clients left his insurance office. People talked. Church became awkward for him. Mutual friends picked sides without announcing it openly. Then Vanessa left too. That part almost made me laugh. According to Teresa, who somehow always knew everybody's business, Vanessa discovered Greg had started messaging another woman while trying to rebuild things with her. Imagine that. A man who cheats continuing to cheat. Shocking development. One rainy Tuesday in February, I came home from work and found a voicemail from Greg sitting on my phone. First one in almost 2 months. I stood in my kitchen listening while microwave macaroni rotated behind me like the world's saddest dinner soundtrack. His voice sounded tired. Older somehow. Diane, I know you probably don't want to hear from me. Correct. But I needed to say I'm sorry again. Not just for what happened at the wedding. For all of it. I leaned against the counter quietly. You didn't deserve any of that. I see that now. I actually closed my eyes at that. Because here's the thing, nobody tells you. Sometimes the apology comes long after it matters. I really did love you, he said softly. That part almost got me. Almost. Then he added, I hope someday you remember the good parts too. And suddenly, I understood something very clearly. I already had. That was never the problem. The good parts were real. That's what made everything else hurt so much. I deleted the voicemail before it finished. Not angrily. Not dramatically. Just tired. Done. A few weeks later, I finally sold the wedding dress. There's a little consignment shop outside Columbus that specializes in formal wear. The owner offered me way less than the dress was worth. I accepted immediately. Couldn't stand seeing it in the closet anymore. When I handed over the garment bag, the woman behind the counter smiled sympathetically. Bad memories. I surprised myself by smiling back. Not anymore. And that was true. Mostly. Healing isn't some big cinematic moment where orchestras play and suddenly you're whole again. It's smaller than that. It's realizing you went an entire afternoon without thinking about them. It's laughing without forcing it. It's buying furniture for a place nobody else helped choose. It's peace arriving quietly one ordinary day and deciding to stay. A few months ago, I thought my life ended in a country club gazebo in front of 140 horrified guests. Now I think maybe it restarted there. Not because exposing Greg fixed everything. It didn't. I still carry embarrassment sometimes. Still avoid driving past Willow Creek when possible. Still feel a little sick hearing Canon in D at weddings. But I also trust myself more now. That matters. Because after 40, self-respect becomes harder to rebuild than romance. And more valuable too. The truth is, I stopped needing to be chosen by somebody else. I just wanted peace with myself again. And eventually, little by little, I found it. If you've ever stayed too long because starting over felt terrifying, you're not weak. Most people do. But losing yourself slowly hurts a whole lot more than beginning again from scratch. Sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is disappoint everybody else long enough to finally stop disappointing themselves.